Yeah. Is this my diet brain or what?
Yeah, I know. Don't worry about it.
Cool, we're good to go, Mark.
How long you been dieting for this show?
37 weeks.
Oh my God, is that a world record?
It's actually my, it's my
37
longest.
weeks.
I know. I tried to think about how many months that was the other day. And
If my
I
math
couldn't-
is correct, that's like 2.6 years.
That's what it felt like. I honestly
A
couldn't.
long ass time.
Yeah, December 11th.
You must have been really fat. That's what we need to start
Fat-
out with.
yeah.
How
How
fat?
fat were you?
Yeah, were you like a big cow? beforehand?
I mean, I
This is
dropped-
why we don't have women on the show.
Oh, I don't
Yeah.
give a shit. No, I've been way fatter before than I was at the
So
start of
have
this
I.
prep.
You've seen that.
Yeah. So
You've seen
fat.
the bloat. You know, my brother, Mad Dog, R.I.P., he passed on years ago. But when I met my wife, he had a great way of checking out my future. And that was to look at my wife's mom. And he's like, damn. He's like, you're in good hands. And your mom's hot, by the way.
Hair flip.
I mean, she's like, oh, this whole thing. When I first met you guys together, I think it was at a trade show, maybe at the Arnold or something like
It was
that.
the Olympia, I think.
And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, now it makes sense why Laurin is the way she is. All dolled up,
Aw.
looking wonderful.
Oh, mom. Yeah, she comes to all my shows, so she's
Yeah,
show mom.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Comes to
Wear a
all
little
your
Loco Fit shirt.
bodybuilding shows, huh?
Yep.
How about the powerlifting meets that your hubby's done?
Yeah, if they're close, they
Yeah.
come. Her and my dad are really like supportive with all that. So
Very
they try
cool.
to be cheerleaders for everything.
So unfortunately, we don't have that many chicks on the show, and we need to get in a better routine of that because people are going to start to talk about us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Andrew?
yeah, it doesn't help that we're always sweaty and you have your shirt off every time we hang out.
I know, and we're always grabbing each other's butts, and worse.
I mean, and the rooms, the sign, don't enter. So.
Yeah, and that's when people are here, so you can imagine.
Yeah, it gets to be pretty bad. But what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about nutrition, and I want to talk about how does it differ. Like some people will say, oh, it doesn't matter, and then you got like a lot of coaches for powerlifting and for bodybuilding, and I think it's just a blanket statement just so they don't have to do extra work, and they're like, it's the same, you do the same. You're going to do 12 sets of chest if you're a guy or a girl, and it's like, to me, a lot of that kind of thinking has never really made any sense. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that nutrition particularly is so individualized, if we're going to like focus on that. When bodybuilding started, I would say that a lot of the people who got into it had very similar physiques, right? Because there was only like two divisions. There was a male division and a female division. And you kind of either like had that body type or you didn't really think about doing it.
I see.
Right?
And it was just bodybuilding.
And it was just bodybuilding. And at that point, when it all started, like bodybuilding looked a lot more like figure does today, but still like you were genetically, you looked a certain way. And then now that they've added all these divisions, there's a lot of different body types that are coming into the sport. So I think that we need a lot of different diets to handle that. So it's not just like eat chicken and rice and that works for you. That may work for you. But
Right.
like, for example, like for me, with my clients, I coach people on a variety of different styles of dieting, right? Like some people do keto, some people do carb cycling, some people do, lower fat, higher carb, other people do opposite. Some people do higher protein than lower protein. I mean, it just really just depends. And then there's things, of course, like meal timing. I'm big on time restricted feeding. So like when you eat, like there's all these different variables. So when people say things like, oh, it just matters how many calories you have or like what your macros are, I think you're really missing the mark. For people who are just getting started, right? Like I wouldn't overwhelm them with all these details. But if you're stepping on stage to do a physique competition and you're trying to look your absolute best at like the most extreme level, I don't think it can just be like, yeah, it's just your macros. Like there are so many other things to it. And even if it is only 5%, why wouldn't you want that 5% to be better?
Now, a standard diet to get on a stage, whether you're doing bikini, figure, bodybuilding, or whether you're male or female, the conventional way of doing things, which is just what I've seen and what I see from the masses, doesn't necessarily mean it's right for everybody, but usually the fat content is low. The amount of protein that you take is high. And the amount of carbohydrates you take kind of is where maybe some more individual preferences might come in, and I'm sure the fat can be manipulated there too, because those are your two main energy sources, your fat and your carbs. Um, is that kind of what you've seen? You know, is that some of the strategy that you utilize?
So what I would say that that's right. Like protein is generally on the higher end, and then you really can kind of play with carbs or fats. Now, for most people, I find that a lower fat approach and more moderate carbs seems to do best for body composition. But if you are somebody who doesn't respond as well to carbs, I find that people do better with significantly lower carbs and a little bit higher fat. There's always going to be calorie restriction with a diet, but I would say that most people don't do well with both. You kind of either need one or the other, like in certain amounts. And then one thing I will say, when I say low fat, some of these diet plans and whatever, you'll see people, females eating 10 grams of fat for 6 months, that run to the fucking hills if that's what your coach has you on. Like, that is not ever okay. I just mentioned this before we got on. I see that for females, the window of where fat should be is just a little bit different than males. I find that you can drop males' fats a little bit lower for a little bit longer without as many hormonal issues as maybe females. 40's really where I like to stop dropping fat for females and then really kind of hammer down on the carbs. Maybe drop it to like 35, like for the last maybe like 2-ish, 3 weeks if we have to. But I'd much rather play around with carbs and cardio than anything else. There's also things like refeeds, which is typically, you may increase fat a little bit, but it's usually a carb increase. And I find that if you're somebody who's doing a lower to moderate fat approach and then a moderate to higher carb approach, that works really, really nice. Now, there are some people who, for whatever reason, I mean, obviously genetics are a huge thing, respond better to fats. I find that older clients respond better to lower carb, higher fat. And again, this is within the range of calorie restriction as well.
And just like, try to keep in mind of what we're talking about. We're talking in general terms.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind, I'm sure that you work with some international people as well, but for the most part, you're working with people that have first world problems, basically. They have the convenience of having food everywhere. And the insulting of the metabolism over an extended period of time, from the time you were 3 until the time you're 53, is kind of what we're talking about. And so for the older individual, I mean, there may be hormonal reasons, like you literally just certain things may shut down at certain points, testosterone and some of these things. But I would also argue that if you had a lifetime of healthy habits, maybe you could prolong a lot of these things and you could outlast a lot of these problems, But for the most part, we all grew up in households where we had an overabundance of food. We had, you get rewarded, good report card, good this, good that. Or parents are just, they're just tired of you being annoying, so they bring you for ice cream, like just...
Shut up and eat this ice cream.
Yeah, just, you're just, let's get everybody out of the house, get everybody to calm down. And
food is very cultural and social. I
Right.
mean, that's just the way that, humans have evolved over millions of years. Is like food is a cultural and a social thing. And you want to get together with friends and family and enjoy food. And that's probably one of the hardest parts, I think, with competition prep is the mindset of, okay, there is going to be restriction during, and you have to accept that. But you can still be a part of things, right? You do a really good job at this. Like, you still have a family, you still run a business. You don't just say, like, I'm doing a bodybuilding show, everything else has to
Peace out.
Fuck off. No, you really do a really good job at that. Some people won't put themselves in that situation. They really isolate themselves. But you have to understand, going into it, there's going to be some restriction, and you're just going to have to either work with it, like either bring your own food, you can order something, or just don't eat. Afterwards is really the hard part, because you've had this restriction, right? And then you've built up...
The aftermath.
Oh, the after is way harder than the prep, because you're working so hard towards this like high goal, and everybody knows that it's super challenging. And then as you've been dieting, obviously you're hungry and you're talking to your friends and you want to go try this, and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to go eat that together and this and that. And then the following weeks after...
You develop a list.
Yeah. And the first few weeks after a show, everybody wants to take you out. Everybody wants to go celebrate. And that's normal. And you can do that, but you also have to know when to celebrate modestly and then when to like rein it back in. And the celebrations can't keep happening in your pantry at 2 a.m. when nobody's around. And that's the hard part.
Damn it.
Yeah.
That's something I see very often is people are taking victory laps left and right, and they haven't really done anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it happen all the time. And there's just not enough. There's not enough like sacrifice being made to even get to some of these celebrations, and that some of these things get to be very hard because as you're talking like socially, oh man, you're really missing out. You know, you hear people say all the time, "Oh man, just just have a piece of cake with me, live a little."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, I don't want to live a little. I want to live a lot, and I want to live the way that I want to live on my terms, in my way, and I don't want to get involved in your bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be fatter. I want to be better. So it gets to be hard too because it's like, no, but this is special cake made from grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's these certain situations where it's like, you know what? Get the stick out of your ass. Stop being a jerk. Have the goddamn meatballs that your aunt made that she only makes once a year. And if you choose to have some restriction on it, just have one or two. You know,
exactly. But that's almost harder.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
is
way harder.
Yeah, once you get the taste for it.
Then you're like, you get the fuckets, and then you're like, well, I'll eat the whole a whole bowl of meatballs, and then the big ziti, and then the cake, and then so that's where the issues come in. And people mean really well, you know what I mean? Because they're not saying like, they're not trying to sabotage you. But it's the same thing. You probably get this with work too. Like, you work so much, you shouldn't work so much. Like, why are you doing this? Like, just like go on a vacation, just like relax. And it's the same thing with like the bodybuilding stuff. And people really underestimate how much it takes to be really successful. I mean, if you just want to be mediocre, that's fine. Like, for all intents and purposes, get on stage and be like average. But if you want to be your absolute best, you're going to have to do a lot unless you are just off the charts genetically gifted, which most people are not. So if you want to be your best, which may not win, but your best, you're going to have to do a lot and sacrifice a lot during and after. Even, again, if you're looking at a competitive season, if you're looking to be a competitive athlete at something, whether it's powerlifting or bodybuilding or even like endurance sports, like there's an on and an off season. You can't just be on during the on season and then off during the off season. There's still a lot going on in the off season that you need to do, and that's different for every sport.
It's extremely problematic. You know, bodybuilders bodybuild too much, powerlifters powerlift too much, lawyers are lawyering too much, and whoever's doing these particular jobs, these doctors or it could be an Uber driver, for God's sakes. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you don't have the opportunity to get experience outside of that, then what are you doing? What are you learning? If you only read one book your entire life, that's what you know. If you've only been taught a handful of things and no one else ever taught you anything, it doesn't mean that you're dumb. It doesn't mean that you're rude. It just means that you never learned anything else. And that's what you see happening a lot. And when it comes to bodybuilding or powerlifting, you can do it so much and you can be so into it that it could be to your detriment. As you're mentioning, some of the females dieting too much. Maybe some of the men are guilty of going the other direction and saying, I'm going to be big. And they go from 235 to 295. And it's like, do we really need to be 295 in the off season? Probably not. You know, if we gained 15 pounds, if we gained 20 pounds, you'd probably more reasonable.
Be a lot better off. What happens too, I think, with a lot of the competitive endeavors, if you are a competitive person, is you get this taste for it, right? And you get especially with like, I mean, just competing, you get this like really high, and then there is always subsequent lows afterwards, and it might be a small low or it might be like a really low, and then what you think to get you out of that is that you need to do another event, and the really hard part with
addiction, you just described addiction,
basically, and what's really hard, every show you do is a dopamine hit. You're like, oh, I'm just gonna keep going, and then
I need
what's
more.
Really bad with the physique competitions is typically what happens is they have a very restrictive diet and then they kind of fall off a little bit and then they maybe gain a little bit too much. And then this is, again, particularly females, which is who I deal with. And then they're like, oh, well, I got to diet again because I gained some weight. Once you do that a few times, you're really not in a good spot, like mentally or physically. After a diet, like you are not in a good place hormonally, metabolically, mentally. Like you need to once you said your season's done, you need to be done, right? And you need to kind of move forward and have like a healthy off season. And if you just keep going back for this after you've gained a little bit of weight, try to pull it off, gain some more, try to pull it off, and you keep going up and down, that's when you start to see these huge issues and these girls who just compete nonstop for a few years, and then you never hear about them again. And then there could be some other things involved that have like really messed them up hormonally.
Some of these girls are gaining like 30, 40 pounds, and they're not big people to begin with, so that's an excessive amount of weight, right?
And really fast.
Yeah.
And you see this a lot, and it's like heartbreaking. You know what I mean? But really, at the end of the day, I feel bad, but then you have to say, okay, you have to take personal responsibility for what you're doing. And me and Paul actually just did a long podcast on this because the new trend is to bash competing for like your problems. Like, competing ruined me, competing ruined my metabolism. I gained all this weight. Look, you shouldn't do a show. Just love yourself how you are. No. Take some personal responsibility. Nobody was feeding you after the show. You were the one who did that. Now, again, you're in a place that's not productive for like, it's very conducive for weight gain after a show, right? And I'm not discounting any hormonal issues, any mental issues, but you have to sort that out yourself. And the sport is not its problem. You just had the whiplash of being a competitive athlete at something.
Right.
And a lot of people who get into this, there's a low barrier to entry. So they may not have ever been athletes before. So they're like, oh, let me just do something competitive. And then they get in and then they get hooked, and then they get hit after hit.
I think what we're dealing with is you're trying to get to a peak state, and really what matters most is your average state, because your peak state, you're in it for 3 weeks. It's a small pocket that you ride out for a very small period of time. And even after 37 weeks of dieting, you end up with a couple photos and a couple shots.
Yeah, and you
at an event.
can't live with that forever,
Right.
and people want to keep that going. And I'm sure you get this, which I think also plays into the psychological issues, is that people really compliment you as you get leaner because
Right.
it's very dramatic. The same thing as when you're getting stronger, right? When you're getting to the pinnacle of anything that you're trying to achieve, right? So say it's getting leaner, it's very dramatic. And people start noticing, especially as you get like a lot leaner. And then they see your photos and they see you on stage and like everything's all peaked and like your abs and everything's perfect. And you get hit with all these positive comments. And some people who have, whether it's low self-esteem or they don't have anything else going on, they use that as their like crutch. And they're like, oh, well, I can't, if I stop competing and I gain a little bit of weight, nobody's going to say this anymore. And then you see it, they live through these old photos on their Instagram. And it's just like this huge mess. And there's so many issues that people like tie together with competing that can make it really negative experience, but it can be so positive if you look at it in a completely different way.
Why do you think people get so upset over weight gain? Or I was just watching a show the other day, and the woman's like, they took this picture of me, and I had no idea I was this heavy, and she was really upset. Which I'm not saying that I don't sympathize. I'm just literally just asking you the question of why you feel this happens. Or you watch Biggest Loser, and someone's crying, and it's like, literally, this is a body of work for you. You ate excessive amounts of food for a very long time, and you did not take care of yourself. I don't know how it would differ from not taking a shower and not brushing your teeth for a long time and going, holy cow, after 25 days of not taking a shower and not brushing my teeth, I have cavities and I smell really bad. And then you're shocked about it. And then could you imagine crying about it? Could you imagine that? Could you imagine being like, oh my God, I smell so bad, I can't believe it? How do you think we get into this trap?
I think it comes back down to personal responsibility, and people don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation with themselves. It obviously starts somewhere, right? Like whether it was when you were younger, you ate a lot and you had maybe poor habits instilled with you, whatever, or you had a breakup and you started overeating, whatever. I've heard everything, right? And I totally, again, sympathize,
Sometimes
empathize.
activity stops.
with
A lot
it.
of people have got injured, and then they
you get
can't.
hurt.
Yeah.
You start a certain medication. You get whatever it is, right? But at the end of the day, you have to monitor yourself. Like nobody's going to do that for you. Like people mean well, right? But like you can tell somebody until they're blue in the face, like, hey, you've been gaining a little bit of weight. Like, hey, have you showered? Like, hey, have you done whatever? And until you want to do it, until you want to change, you're not going to. So people really just don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation with themselves. Like, I want to get better. I need to take personal responsibility for my actions. And I mean, that's the only thing that I can think of.
And in that
makes
moment,
sense.
it probably hits them.
I mean, like on the plane, on the second flight over here today, the whole ride, the two people next to me, it was a girl probably like 14, and then like a, like maybe her mom or aunt or whatever. The whole time they're eating pizza, drinking soda, eating candy bars, cookies, which, mind you, I was like, oh, man, I'm like really
You guys know how to live.
I'm really eyeing this up right now. But I also feel sad because you just want to have diabetes, I guess. Like this whole 2-hour flight has just been like an insulin bomb the entire time.
The girl could already be pre-diabetic, and that's why she's so hungry.
Oh, yeah. No, exactly. And I know what it, like, they think, oh, I just need a little something, and they just kept pulling candy out of their bag. And I'm like, this is just never ending. And it's so, you just get caught up in that, and you get caught up in, whatever. And you see it on the extreme ends too, like my 600-pound life and that kind of stuff, right? And my boyfriend's a firefighter and has had to deal with situations like that at work. And one time I kid you not, the lady, mind you, the one guy almost broke his arm trying to get her out of the house because there was like 6 of them lifting this one person.
Right.
And they got like shoved in a corner and whatnot. And she's like, I'm so uncomfortable. I need something to eat. I need snacks. Like, you guys are starving me over here. And Brian was like, I'm just going to walk away right now before I say something that I probably shouldn't. And like there's a huge disconnect, I think, when it's kind of like any extreme, right? Like an addict. You get to that place and you're not like, man, I really want to do all these drugs today. It just becomes part of your habit, right? The same thing happens with food and you don't realize it. But until you wake up and you have that conversation with yourself, like, am I who I want to be? Am I working towards those goals? What am I doing here? You're never going to get out of it.
Yeah, it's hard to make those changes. I know people get so wrapped up in their food. I've heard people say, that they can't go see a movie without having food. They can't. They'll say that they can't do stuff, and it's like, well, I disagree. If someone was to give you $10,000 cash, you would probably figure out a way to not drink or eat anything during the duration of the movie. But it's just
it's a self-limiting belief too, because you've always what you've always done, right? And you just don't think that you can break that habit.
Right.
And I'm here to tell you guys that you can. And there's so many ways. Obviously, you don't need to make it harder on yourself than necessary, right? Like if you're in this place where you feel like you can't go to the movie without having a snack, I wouldn't say that you need to jump on a bodybuilder diet tomorrow, right? Like maybe take some other steps. Maybe have like a better snack right while you're there, and then maybe like eventually cut that out. Just small steps. But you need to understand that you really can do anything. I'm sure Jocko and all that. So I listened to Extreme Ownership, the audiobook, while I listened to a lot of podcasts and videos and everything while I do cardio, because I was doing a lot of cardio. Yep. And I like blew through the audiobook because I was, doing a bunch of cardio. And just when you're driving.
Gets you fired up.
And super fired up because I'm listening I'm like, oh, I'm dying. I'm so tired today. I'm this, whatever. And I'm listening to like, first the messages that they're saying and then the stories that they're using to teach the message, and I'm like, I'm pathetic. I'm on the treadmill for an hour. This is nothing in comparison to like what people are actually doing.
Right.
And it's just all about a mindset.
And it's what you chose to do.
Yeah, that's another big thing, obviously, with anything like bodybuilding.
It's like I made the decision. I have a cushy enough life that I could come to the gym at 1 in the afternoon and do an hour of cardio.
Yeah. And
like,
starve myself for fun.
Am I really bitching about this? And I got access to food everywhere if I feel like not doing it or whatever, right? I think the hard thing becomes strategy. Mm-hmm. How do we? The reason why something like the war on carbs exists, or the reason why a ketogenic diet exists, is because the pendulum has swung so far one way. I'm actually a believer that we don't really need a particular diet. If we have taken the proper precautions throughout our entire life, we wouldn't really need a diet. We would just eat the things that are around us. However, we're in a different time, we're in a different world. There's a lot of convenient, yummy foods around us, and we have a real hard time with control. So how do we build out some strategies? Let's start with the movies. Mm-hmm. Like, what's a strategy? Do I just eat a nutritious meal beforehand? Do I try to sneak something in? Like what do you do when you go to the movies?
So this is like, I've been doing this for so long. I honestly don't really snack during movies just because, well, I'm usually dieting, or I find that eating in front of a television or something mindless. She's going to
be like, I chew on some gum, and everybody listening is going to be like, what a bitch.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Actually.
Fucking sugar-free gum. No, God damn it. I'm not listening to the show anymore.
My favorite thing is, this is my treat when we go to the movies.
Branched chain amino acids.
No. Those like the Coca-Cola machines, like the red ones? So they have raspberry Powerade Zero, which they do not sell in the bottles. So I will spend $6 on a drink. I don't care. And I sneak as many refills as possible for that shit. And that is like my treat when we go to the movies. And usually, again, it's because I find that mindless eating, like, watch, like your mind's already
yeah, I got
being stimulated while you're watching a movie. Like, do you really need to eat too? Like, eat beforehand. Don't go in hungry, obviously. But if, so I would say that that's just like a willpower kind of thing and just breaking that habit. The most important thing that I see with strategy is people are not prepared. And I'm not saying that you have to go full bore, like Tupperware, prep your meals a week out kind of a thing. But having a few things around prepped, even if it's one meal a day, is going to be exponentially better for your progress, right? Because usually what happens is people will kind of pick up something, maybe like lackluster for breakfast, if anything, and then they maybe have like a shitty snack or like lunch, and then they really overdo it at dinner, and then they're like, oh, well, I haven't really eaten all day, so then just munch and munch and munch and munch all night. And that's very, very typical of what most people do. So I would say that having more structure to your meals and having some of it prepped. I mean, honestly, there's no excuse nowadays with amazing meal prep companies like Icon Meals, like at the hotel, I had them shipped here, right? Their meals, quality food, taken into account with shipping and everything, about $9-10 a meal. Okay, you're going to spend that eating out no matter what, right? So there's really no excuse, right? Like there's so many companies like that. And then when you go places, so I travel a lot, and I will have to eat out even when I'm dieting. And people will say, oh, well, I'm traveling, I can't eat out. Or I can't stay on my diet because I'm traveling. No, you just chose to not eat what you wanted to, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
people
there's
say it all the time.
Literally, I did a show in Italy 2 years ago, of all places, right? And I couldn't bring food because it was international. So I had to eat in Italy for like 2 days before the show, and I made it work. Now, I ate a lot of chicken and boiled potatoes and olive oil, but that's what I did, right? And you just have to kind of make it work sometimes. When you go out places, you have to have a strategy about what you're going to eat. And every single restaurant has meat, vegetables, eggs. I mean, the most bare minimum if you're very, very strict, right? And you ask for things. People, oh my God, how do you ask for that without oil? I just ask them, hey, could I have the,
Can you put it on the grill?
Hey, could I have the sirloin?
And they'll put it on the grill.
With, medium rare, no oil, please. Okay. And then you can tell when it comes out if it has oil on it, right?
Well, I went to a place one time and I asked them, if they could make the salmon, because last time I went there, it was in some oil and it was delicious. But I said, yeah, can you cook it without the oil? And they're like, we're not sure how to do that. And I said, do you have I was like, do you have a grill? Because you could just put it on a grill. And they're like, yep. I was like, just put it on the grill.
Wow.
They're like, will that work? Will it stick? I was like, no, it shouldn't stick.
Oh my God.
I cook it on my grill all the time.
Yeah, so
you
could
just put aluminum foil down if you need to. But
you just have to ask a lot of times too, right? Have a strategy. Like you can go out.
Usually they're accommodating.
Normally
just
don't
pretty
be a
nice.
bitch. I mean, like don't be like, oh, don't cook my food in oil, you piece of shit. I mean, you have to like be nice about
you
it.
fat bastard.
Yeah, like you have to be a little bit, nice and polite.
Yeah. Right. Earlier this week, I ordered a baked chicken and broccoli from Spaghetti Factory.
Okay.
They came back twice. They're like, well, what about the marinara? I'm like,
you're like, no,
none.
Stop.
And they came back again. Like, so where do you want the marinara? Like,
is this covered in cheese? I'm not sure if I wrote your order down.
Yeah,
right.
I was like, okay, fine. Put the marinara on the side. And
you really want it.
Yeah, I wish I didn't do that because I ended up eating the marinara.
Damn it.
I know.
You need to read Extreme Ownership, okay? God, get it together. But no, perfect example. Somewhere that I love to eat when we travel is IHOP. Now, I would love to house some pancakes while I was at IHOP, right? That would be amazing. But you can order an egg white vegetable omelet, no oil. You can order eggs on the side over easy, poached. If you get poached eggs, you know that they're just literally cooked in water.
Right.
If you are having like toast or something, you can ask for that dry. I mean, there's so many options. You can literally eat as low calorie as possible. You just have to choose to do that. Like, yes, I would rather order the stack of the cupcake confetti, whatever the hell they're called, delicious pancakes.
Oh, yeah.
Too sweet.
Those are, don't get it with the icing. Without the icing, it's perfect. Yeah, the icing's overkill.
And I don't know if people haven't stepped foot into a grocery store in a long time, but
there's a lot of good options now.
Oh my God, everything's all cooked and prepped and cut up and everything. I mean, there's tons of vegetables. Obviously, fruit is like one of those things where, it's not sometimes maybe on a strict bodybuilding prep or whatever, but fruit should very easily fit into anyone's diet. Even when I was doing a keto diet, I'd have fruit here and there. And you have so many options in terms of cheeses and meats, and there's just, it might not be the most ideal thing, but it's a better choice than
Exactly. Like
maybe something else you might
it's
have.
all about where you're at too. Context is so important. Like if we're talking about, like my mom or your mom's diet, that's going to be a lot different than like what we're doing to step on stage this weekend, right?
Yeah.
And that's super important to remember. So even making like I'm a coach and I compete myself and I, coach people with macro diets. And obviously we change things as far, like I said, some people are keto, some people are, low fat, some people are whatever it is. But at the end of the day, like that's a very niche population, right? I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to do that. Like I would say that for most people, you don't need a food scale. Like if you don't have one, it's okay. Maybe that's like a step down the road, but just let's start making better choices.
Right.
Watching how much you eat, when you're eating, like are you not eating all day and then just like overeating at night? That's not really a good idea either.
There's so many ways of doing all this stuff. I haven't written down one thing food wise this entire time. I haven't. Now I have weighed some stuff, but I did so in the beginning, and I don't mess with it anymore. I don't count my calories. I'm not like, oh, I had 2650 today and 2700 yesterday, and like I don't. First of all, I don't care. Secondly, the caloric. Try to look it up. Try to look it up and tell me how many calories are in 4 ounces of cod. You're gonna get 17 different answers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's impossible to even know with any accuracy, really.
Well, especially when you get into like the packaged food stuff, like a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, they have
especially
50%. They're allowed 50% leeway on their labels. 50%.
So a lot of stuff like
That's wild.
I try to, promote Whole Foods and things like that. Not the store, whole
Right.
paycheck, but Whole Foods. When I write that on my phone, it autocorrects like capital W, capital F.
really?
I'm like, no, not that's not
circle
what I-
R.
That's not what I mean.
That's because it's owned by Amazon. They're taking over the world.
Just listening to me. So I, having majority of your stuff come from Whole Foods, and there is going to be a little bit less error with, say, jasmine rice than there might be with some like weird low calorie bullshit that you're like eating out of a package.
Right.
Obviously, I, will eat stuff like that too. But for the most part, keeping it simple, and that's a really good message for a lot of people. Like, hey, just eat more simple foods. Like that's going to be most likely better. So the way that packaged foods work, especially like junk food, air quotes, is it's literally created to be like the perfect obesogenic food. Like if you look at it calorie wise, it's about 50-50 calories, carbs, and fats. So because fat is almost double, you'll see something that says maybe it's like 9 grams of fat to 20 carbs for like a serving. That's like the perfect obesogenic food. Like your brain has been wired over years and years of evolution to go, how do I get the most amount of calories for the least amount of work? Well, we have it sitting in all of our grocery stores, right? So you can't think that you're just going to override millions of years of evolution when this is super tasty.
I want
and it's
everybody
super easy.
Just to think about this for a second.
Eat.
Take some olive oil. Take a teaspoon of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, and just John Cena passed out. He's like, I don't want any
He couldn't take
extra virgin olive oil. Couldn't handle the virgin part of it. He's gonna hang out with Jesus. He lost his hat too.
Oh my
Poor
God.
fix that. But have some extra virgin olive oil. Take a teaspoon of that. Right? Fucking disgusting. Burns the back of your throat really, really bad. Right? Now take a piece of bread. Dip the bread in the extra virgin olive oil.
A little bit of salt.
Yeah. Now add some salt to it. And bread, even though we don't recognize bread as being sweet, bread has some sugar in it usually. It usually has some sweetness to it. And now we have a combination of things going off in our mouth that are just, it's like fireworks going off on your tongue. And it's this fucking party going on there, right? and those are the kind of things that we're up against. I mean, as you do like a bodybuilding prep or anybody who has really tried to examine their nutrition, when you go to eat something like spinach and you just eat it completely raw, if you try it a few times, you'll actually notice that the spinach it's not disgusting. It actually has like a nutty flavor to it. Now, if you can figure out things to add to it that aren't going to mess up whatever diet plan you're on, well, now we're starting to get on the right track. Maybe a little bit of lemon, maybe a little bit of
Seasonings. People
olive
forget
oil,
about that kind of stuff.
maybe a little bit
It's
of salt, maybe some salt and pepper, right? And you start to kind of mix and match things together. And somebody might say, I hate vegetables. Okay, well, so does most people. A lot of people hate vegetables, but maybe you start to mix them in on your plate with some meat and some other things that you like. And maybe the vegetables only represent 20 or 15% of your meal at first, just so you can get used to it. Do you need vegetables to have a long, healthy life? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. There's studies that show either way. There's studies that show good. There's studies that show that they're neutral. I've seen studies that show that kind of stuff. But they're important. It's important to recognize that they do have vitamins, they do have minerals, they do have potassium, they do have fiber. These are all things that can help kind of clear things out for us. And also, if anything else, or if nothing else, it's a filler.
Which is huge with that.
And there's not a lot of calories in it.
I'm basically a cauliflower. If you weren't aware, I eat so much cauliflower this prep because it's probably the most versatile vegetable because it's semi flavorless, but it will take the flavor of really anything, and you can cook it up a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many options to try and strategies, I would say, to get started, and really that's what it is. Is a lot of people have this mental block, like I don't like healthy food. What the hell does that even mean? Like, what is a healthy food? Like, that's
people
that's
really
a debate
say
too.
that
Yeah,
all the time.
like, and you're
so
like,
I had
That
I had
tastes
some
vitamin-y.
I had
What the
Wild
fuck did you just
Planet.
say?
I had Wild Planet chicken the other day. I opened it up, and the person that was next to me here in the office was like, "That smells like tuna." And I was like, I knew the answer. I was like, "Do you like tuna?" They're like, "No." And I'm like, I said, "You have an allergic reaction to healthy food because this is chicken, and it doesn't smell anything remotely close to tuna." And they were like, "Oh."
not gonna lie, I just don't know about the sardine thing. Like that's like my limit.
Yeah.
I feel like of
well,
that's the company though, right?
yeah,
That,
yeah.
Not too sure about that one.
They're not bad. When it comes to like texture, or it comes to like, trying something fucking weird like eating an eyeball or something, yeah, it's different. I mean, you're really kind of stretching when you're going for some of those foods.
Yeah, Dom he's like, oh, I just love can of sardines or two. You're like,
Um,
I'm like, I don't know.
They're tough to even look at. I can eat them, but I don't know. I try to look at some shit like this, like I don't want to do everything so hard that it's at the expense of having fun and doing other things. Like I don't want to eat stuff that's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a misconception. Like the foods that I'm eating right now is all stuff that I like eating. Just a couple days ago, I got kind of tired of eating chicken, and I took the rest of the chicken in my fridge and I threw it out. I'm like, I'm not eating chicken anymore. I'm done. I need to move on. And so I started eating more fish, and I like fish. So, you find things that you like, and your food doesn't have to be gross. Now, in a bodybuilding diet, things get to be weird. But for the most part, when you're just trying to be nutritious and you're just trying to be healthy.
I feel like that's not even the same conversation. You
Right.
know, like the bodybuilding stuff is so extreme at the end. Maybe not in the beginning. I would say that it's maybe, well, all of this is extreme to most people, right? Like just, tracking your food and being super hyper aware of what you're eating for most of the time. But towards the end is when it really gets, I would say, it just kind of swings really, really restrictive. And that's just because the goal is really restrictive.
Kind of like a month too.
Yeah, and it's not
that
forever.
long.
It's not, well, for some people it is, like we talked about in the beginning. If you don't stop and you don't take an off season, then it can kind of become this weird forever of under eating, overeating.
Right.
And then that's when it kind of gets real weird. But if you're doing a show and you're very restrictive, just calorically and just in general, you're getting to a very lean body fat level. Like that's going to be pretty fucking hard, right? Like if not, you would walk around that lean all the time. That's what I try to explain to people. Like if the weight was just falling off of you, like then that would be easy, but like that's probably not the case, right? So because it is so extreme afterwards, I would say that it is okay to like have a meal or two that's maybe more than you would normally have, right? Like after the show, like I just like to enjoy like a nice meal. It depends if I have another show coming up or not, or whatever that might be. But so people might look at that like, oh my God, you diet all this time and then you have this like huge meal. Like that's kind of crazy. And it's like, well, you have that and then you kind of move on and then you can't have that forever.
Right.
And that's where the issue becomes, I think, is people will get with regular, non-competitors too. They think it has to be so restrictive. And then because they see whatever diet in the newspaper or the Today Show or some magazine, and then they do it for a few weeks and then they're like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And that's setting yourself up for long-term failure. Like,
Right.
you're never going to be successful if you're always trying to eat foods that you hate, and you're always trying to do some weird workout class, and you're always trying, whatever that is, like, and again, if you're doing a bodybuilding show, there's going to be parts that suck, and you're going to be aware of that going into it, right? Okay, I got to do some stuff. I don't
Right.
really want to eat this chicken, but maybe I have to, or that's all I have right now, or I'm really hungry, but I got to suck it up. But when you're doing this for like a lifelong thing, there is no reason to absolutely hate every single part of it. Yes, there's going to be parts that you don't like,
Right.
but if you swing it so far one way, then you're really going to have issues afterwards. Because what happens after your diet? Like, then what? Then you go back to what you were doing beforehand if
Right.
it's so extreme. You need to build that into kind of your lifestyle. And that should be the ultimate strategy, is like replacing bad habits with good habits, and knowing when you can have some fun or cheat or whatever word you want to use with like food, alcohol, whatever your choice is, or both, which is the most fun. But know how to have that in a more moderate amount.
Right. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they were just saying they were just getting back into some training, and they were just getting back in. They just started walking, and they wanted to run, and then I asked them about lifting, and they were like, I don't really, I haven't gotten into lifting yet. I said, well, it's great that you got into walking, and it's great that you're starting to diet. I said those are two very powerful things. And I actually steered them away from running. I said, you know what, running is great, and it can add a lot, but I'd rather see you lift once or twice a week. And the reason why is a lot of times when people I know the guy and I know him well, so a lot of times when people are not fit and they're not in good shape and they start to go running out of nowhere and they're like, I'm going to run 8 miles, they hurt themselves, and then they have they got a negative reinforcement, and they're like, damn it, I hurt myself. There I go, I hurt myself exercising again. They got that negative reinforcement to back everything up. Oh, I'll start the diet next week after this weekend's birthday party, and then the next weekend is the barbecue, and
There's always something.
there's always something going on.
There is always an excuse to not start whatever you want to change. And if you have a life that has at least any kind of like meaning to it, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to be doing things, whether it's family, friends, travel, business, work, like self-development. There's always going to be something.
I'm going to tell you something. You're not missing out. When you go to a barbecue and you only eat the steak and only eat some of the vegetables and you don't eat the Doritos, you are not missing out. I was with my family one day. We all ate, but they were just kind of going hog wild the entire day. I had a steak, some veggies, did kind of my normal thing, and I jetted on out of there, and I went on like a walk, and I was like, I'm gonna walk for like 10 minutes. I had some headphones on, and I was not even paying attention, and I was gone for like 40 minutes. Came back, and guess what?
You were okay.
I was okay. I didn't die, and everybody was in the same exact spot. They were just drunker, if that's a word.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't miss out on anything. I sat down. We all spent another hour together. We all hung out. We got in a hot tub. We messed around and had a good time, and that was that. I didn't miss out on shit. The only thing I missed out on was a bunch of extra calories that I didn't want anyway because they're not going towards my goals.
And I think it's important to understand that sometimes that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to do that once in a while, to be a normal person if you enjoy that, right? Like, if you enjoy food and you enjoy drinking, like, have at it.
Screw it. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to eat a bunch of Doritos.
Yeah, some days you just want to do that. I mean, but
they taste good.
You have to know, it just really depends, again, on your goals and like what you're working towards. And if you have to have enough, you have to put yourself in the right position to do that night and then move forward and get back on it, right? Because that's usually the problem, is once people lose momentum with one thing, then they're like, oh, well, last night I had this, and then, well, now I kind of feel like shit today, so I'll just eat a shitty brunch and I'll just get back on it later. And then they skip a meal because they're full, and then they eat, a bunch of snacks that night, and they're like, oh shit, well, now it's Saturday. Well, Sunday, whatever, I'll just start on Monday, and it just kind of trickles.
Right.
So you can enjoy certain things, again, depending on your goal. If you're doing a bodybuilding show, probably wouldn't suggest eating Doritos and getting really drunk. But you have to know how to reel it back in, and you have to have enough willpower and discipline and strategies in place to do that. And if you don't, then don't even go. Just don't even start there. You know what I mean? Like, don't go down that rabbit hole.
And if you slipped up, you don't need to necessarily punish yourself the next day, but you can kind of work it off. You use it as like a strengthening thing and say that's really going to help strengthen. Those peanut butter cups I ate last night. It's going to help fuel my workout.
Peanut
tomorrow.
butter cups are the best thing.
Oh man, they're so good. But when you go into the gym the next day, I mean, because you've been restricted and because you haven't been maybe eating some of the things that you really enjoy and that you really love, you don't need to go in the gym the next day and say I'm going to do 2 hours of cardio. That's when you're going to start to develop some problems too. But just go in and say, you know what? I'm gonna tear it up today. I have a lot of energy. I feel good. I ate a surplus of food yesterday, and it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a lot of fun. And get in there and get your work done.
Yeah, there's so many ways to handle it, but the worst thing to do is, mess up a little bit and then just keep going down the rabbit hole and the rabbit hole and the rabbit hole, and then each day gets worse. And I've been there too. Like I'm not like preaching to people like, oh, I've never eaten off plan or no, of course I have. You know what I mean? And once you get in that negative mindset, it's really easy to stay there. But you have to look at it as a learning experience. Like, okay, sit down with myself, wake up. Okay, what did I do last night? Right? Like, how did I get there? What was the trigger? What did I do beforehand that maybe didn't set me up properly? What should I do afterwards? Like, you have to examine it. You can't just sweep it under the rug and go, oh, well, I just did that. It'll be okay. Because it might not be, because then it might come back again, but twofold. Instead of maybe Doritos and beer, it was Doritos, beer, and a bunch of Reese cups. And the next time it's also cake. And then, so you have to take control of the situation and go, okay, what did I do? How did I mess up? What were the triggers? What was my environment like? And then, learn from that and move forward.
I want to point out that physiologically, mammals, humans, do not actually need carbohydrates. Is that correct?
I don't feel like I'm as qualified. I mean, I know.
Well, let's just put it this way.
We don't need a lot of carbohydrates. No.
Right. You're not gonna die because of protein neogenesis, or however you say that word.
Gluconeogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis. There we go. Your body. You're not going to die.
Yes.
If you do not eat carbohydrates. Whereas if you don't eat fat and you don't eat protein, it's not like you're going to necessarily just all of a sudden keel over, because there's probably trace amounts in some of the foods that you eat. But over time, you're going to probably run into some real problems.
If you're going to survive on any food, it would be something that's a combination of fat and protein.
Right.
And micronutrients, a.k.a. why people can survive on the carnivore diet
right.
and seemingly be healthy. Now, there could be other deficiencies, but if there's one food to pick, that would be it.
Right. And now there's trace carbohydrates in foods anyway, so it doesn't even really matter that we're at 0 carbs, but you can live a normal life on a very low carbohydrate diet unless there's some sort of weird, crazy circumstance. But for the most part, you can. Now, I've heard people say before that a keto diet works better for men, and I've heard some women say that a keto diet doesn't work for them. What have you seen in working with women? Do you feel that some of these statements are true, or do you feel that maybe women just need to do something slightly different with a diet like that?
So a lot of things, I've learned this over time, that a lot of things that people say about diets that maybe seem like they're not backed by anything, or maybe they seem like bro science, could actually be right, but the way that somebody's articulating it, or they maybe don't understand why. So when people say keto works better for men, first, women are definitely have a more emotional tie to things. That's just general statement. And that happens to also
just
work
life
with
period.
Food. Yeah, just in general, women have a more emotional tie to food. Also, there is some research that I've seen that when you are in a calorie restriction, women have a much greater drop in leptin than men do. So the combination of being extra hungry and kind of mentally feeling unstable, and then maybe having an emotional tie with food kind of is like the perfect storm.
Maybe this is part of the reason why a male and female might be watching TV, and the guy hears something that somebody just says, hey, I stopped drinking soda and I lost 10 pounds. And then the guy does it and the girl does it, and the guy loses 10 pounds and nothing happens for the woman. Is there maybe something what's responsible for something like that, you think?
Well, you'd have to really look at the adherence.
Right. Maybe the guy's having a ton of soda or something like that.
Yeah, the guy could be having more, and he could also... I find that men are generally harder to convince of things, but then once they've decided, they go all in. Whereas women are quicker to say yes to something, but are a little bit wishy-washy and maybe don't adhere as well.
You hear that, ladies?
It's true. I mean, I study this kind of stuff, and I try to be open-minded to this, and I try to realize, okay, what are the issues with, like, men and women following diets and adherence, because that's everything, dietary adherence, and it really is true. Like, it's very hard to convince a male typically to do something that they don't want to do, but then once you do it, they're totally bought in. Whereas a girl, you're like, oh, you can lose 5 pounds. She's like, okay, sign me up. And then she may do it a little bit, and then may kind of fall off, and then and there's all these different responses. Obviously, hormonally as well, women just have a lot more going on, I would say, that fluctuates than maybe men do. Women are generally smaller, obviously, have less muscle mass. So there's a lot of factors that are pinned against you to not lose weight and body fat as well as a male. But I would generally say that a lot of it does come down to adherence, and just commitment to it.
From what you've seen, if a female does follow a ketogenic diet, like a regular ketogenic diet where the fats are high, you're eating eggs and bacon and things like that, have you seen it work for women?
Oh, yeah. I have clients on keto. I think, like we kind of briefly spoke earlier, I think that keto is probably the best for maintenance and or calorie restriction. I do think that when you're in a surplus, particularly if it's a high surplus, and you're trying to get in so many calories from fats that you maybe start having just an excess of calories in general, things could get a little wonky. But I believe that to be true with any excess calories. So I would just say that I think it's a little bit better with like maintenance and restriction, whereas a more balanced approach seems to work a little bit better in my experience with what I've seen with like a surplus. It's just kind of having carbs and fats. But I do see that, like how I mentioned, that kind of don't really like to drop below 40 or 35-ish for dieting. I find that if you do have carbs in your diet, like a decent amount, going over too much fat also doesn't work. Like you can't have both.
Yeah.
Some people, people listening go, oh, I do. Of course, there's always those assholes, right, who can eat anything they want, all the carbs, all the fats, and they have a six-pack. Most people are not that, right? So you have to be very careful when calories get high and then carbs and fats both start to creep up. Because then what I've started to see was, and I didn't understand what this was, beforehand, with some insulin sensitivity issues. And I find that just happens when you're in a chronic calorie surplus and you're just hammering the food, typically carbs and fats together. And I've seen this where I've started to diet some clients and I'm just like, man, this is just not coming off. We're just dropping, nothing's happening. And then this past, I would say, year, me and Rye have gotten pretty interested in testing blood sugar. If you're doing keto, testing ketones is great. But just in general, kind of get a feel for where you're at. It's simple, just a glucometer. Just, hey, see where I'm at, just trending for like the week or the month. And I started to learn more about this. And two people who are really great, who are in the bodybuilding field, John Gorman and Jason Theobald, both put out awesome information. They've both been coaches for many years, intelligent guys, and they started talking about this too, like the same stuff I was seeing. Like we just thought our clients hadn't had an off season long enough, but really they just had insulin sensitivity issues. So I find that can happen when you're just hammering the high calories for a while. And what they use actually is they'll do keto for a few weeks, like hardcore, and then with clients maybe like 4 to 6 weeks, and then add carbs back in, and they just start dropping again. So you really have to kind of reset that, which is a whole, I guess, different topic and kind of a tangent from what you asked. But yes, I do have women do keto, and I do think that it works. I do also find that women enjoy carbs more than men do. I would say that when you think of, like, men typically seem to enjoy high protein, high fat foods, whereas women, like, generally just speaking, are like, I love peanut butter, but give me all the carbs, and that, on my questionnaire, when you inquire as a client, I ask, what do you prefer, carbs or fats? And literally that's like the most typical answer.
I wonder why that happened or how that happened. You know
I don't
what I mean?
know.
Because,
I don't know that reason. I wish.
Because like from a cultural standpoint, it's like, it doesn't actually really.
Well,
it doesn't make sense from like a long time ago, like where somebody would drag a deer out of the woods and everybody would eat it and rejoice, and they'd maybe have that and some berries or something.
Yeah.
But it makes sense from a standpoint of the way I grew up, where my mom was in the house and my mom did all the shopping. So maybe, I mean, a lot of females would be pissed at me about this, but maybe because a lot of the women were home and that's what we grew up with for a long time, maybe mom was buying the yogurts and the cereals and the peanut butter jelly sandwiches and the chips and the pretzels and the this and that, where dad was coming home and want a steak for
Mhm.
dinner, a steak and potatoes or something like
Mhm.
that. So I mean,
There
it's just
is
a hypothetical guess on kind of why, but a friend of mine mentioned that he thinks part of the obesity epidemic is related to women going to work, and
Mm.
I've never heard anybody
Well, there's a lot of
say
issues if you
anything like that.
actually.
But if both parents are gone and the kids are left to their own, they're left to their own decision making, or they're left with a nanny, or they're left with grandma.
Yeah.
If they're left
Grandma's
with
always a pusher.
if they're left
Uh,
with grandma, they're gonna eat ice cream all day. You know what
well,
I mean? So
there's a ton of fascinating research actually just about the way that culture has changed over the past few decades with both male and female working, having a 2-parent household versus a 1-parent household. If you want to like that kind of, there is so much interesting research on that and how that affects not only like your personality and how you like behave in society, but also how you eat. I mean, there's so many factors. If both you have a single parent home and somebody's working a few jobs and they never see you, you're left to your own devices. You may or may not have a high income level. Most likely you don't. There's limited options, right? There's so many like weird
Yeah.
cascades of things. How
maybe
that
mom or
affects.
dad picks up Taco Bell for you because
That's all they can afford, and that's all they have time for.
Yeah, maybe that, but maybe also it's all they thought about. They didn't
Well,
plan
yeah.
ahead, as we talked about
Yeah,
earlier.
I mean, if you're a single parent and you have 3 jobs and you have 3 kids and you don't have
Right.
a lot of money, you're not like, how can I meal prep this week? I mean, so there's a
Yeah.
lot of issues. It's so fascinating, like when you really like dig into that kind of like psychological and cultural stuff. But the one thing that carbs obviously do kind of spike chemicals in your brain that make you feel good and stuff. So I think that there could be a part of that with maybe the women having a more emotional response to the food and that tied to the carbs. That's the only like hypothesis I could think of.
Right.
Which is really like
Now,
stretching.
when you get to training, I heard you mentioning in the gym that you work out like the same body part like 3 times a week. And it's very typical, it's very normal for females to be able to handle more training volume.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the kind of missing element in nutrition is the training sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Ketogenic diets, even though I'm a fan of them because I think it's the ultimate fatty diet for people that have had a heart. And when I say fatty, I mean the person themselves. Like if you're a fat guy or a fat girl and you kind of always been, a ketogenic diet is going to work really well for you because in my opinion, it can help kill off the hunger hormone because you can utilize some intermittent fasting with that as well. You can utilize intermittent fasting for other things too.
Well,
But
it really makes it. It limits the
cycle of
the
sugar,
options.
yeah, that sugar cycle going off in your head of you getting those cravings for a lot of those foods. It limits a lot of the options.
Because most things like we talked about that are tasty are carbs and fats together.
Right.
Right. People are like, oh man, I want some carbs. I love donuts. I'm like, you know how much fat's in a donut, along with the carbs. So really, it's all of that together. And when you kind of take that away, when you say, hey, you can't have any carbs, people start taking away the kind of shit, right? You're not going to have the muffins anymore. You're not
Yeah.
going to have the giant frappuccino craziness. You're not going to have maybe donuts, right? You're going to have
Right.
a lot more limited options, and it's going to be easier to stick to that way because the problem, like we talked about with strategies, is it's very overwhelming for people.
Right.
So when you say, hey, limit this, make sure you eat a good amount of that, they're like, oh, okay. And
Right.
then the subsequent things happen. You don't have as many cravings. You don't have as many up and downs. You kind of have a consistent energy. You just feel good.
Right. And that's one of the huge advantages of a ketogenic diet. Now, in terms of training, it's not a great diet when it comes to working well with your training regimen, and everyone asks me all the time, utilize the diet to get stronger. I'm like, no, it's not. Even in a surplus of calories, there's people who try to have testing and they try to show that it's not better. it's not better.
A lot of those people aren't legitimate either, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, and I know what you're saying.
Sips tea.
When it comes to
That's none of my business.
none of your business. When it comes to starting to put carbohydrates back into the diet. Now, if we're talking about the differences between a male and a female, and this is in general, but from what I've seen, powerlifting wise, bodybuilding wise, women can just handle more. I mean, even work wise, my wife can do like 10 or 20 things in a day, and I can do like 3, and I'm fucking dead beat. I'm tired.
Well, I also think it's different too you have to look at like the total amount of things, right? Like, so I will typically hit most things twice a week. And then if I like a week thing, I'll try to hit 3 times if I'm not like super beat up and injured. But my amount of work as far as like weight goes, right, or like is nowhere near like what Ryan does, right? And obviously, again,
Yeah,
our
of
goals are very
course.
different. But I do
Well, of
feel,
course, you recover from the sets faster. The weights are a lot lighter.
yeah. So there,
Yeah.
it's all. I would say that there is, when you equate for that, I don't really know how different it is, right? And again, I haven't done enough of the like meta analyses to know
Right.
all of that. But I would say that most women are typically not lifting as heavy for as many, sets and reps. But I do kind of see that with, if you're looking at like powerlifting, right?
There's just a frequency going on, I guess.
Yeah.
Like if you train something 2 or 3 times a week as opposed to like once, and then the guys are just going to be training totally differently. Their heart rate is going to shoot up through the roof and it's going to come back down. Whereas the female, their heart rate's not going to shoot through the roof, but it's going to go up and it's just going to stay there throughout the duration of the training session, which I don't even know, but it may burn off more carbohydrates. It may burn off more sugar.
So there are definitely differences
Right.
with, I'm not nuanced enough in the literature to know the exact reasons. But I do know that, women can typically do a little bit more,
Right.
but on a, I guess you would say, smaller scale. But even at like the top elite powerlifting chicks, they're doing a lot. I mean, they're pretty strong and they're hitting it very frequently. Whereas, I know, like, I just feel like guys they can hit their, I feel like when like guys can hit their top like weight and sets and everything like just harder and like and tap into that better, I guess. And maybe that's maybe not
That's
for like
100%, yeah, because their
right?
nervous system's more in tune.
Like, and maybe not for the elite powerlifting girls. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
clearly not even on that realm of
Yeah,
planet.
a lot of it's hard to say these things like just flat out, but a lot of women are neurologically inefficient. Part of the reason why they're not as strong and part of the reason why they're not as fast. They can't just boom tap into their nervous system out of nowhere.
I feel like guys can do that so well.
Yeah, sometimes there are girls that can do that. You watch UFC, and some of these girls, man, in a heartbeat they can knock you on your ass with a left hook or something. But typically, you see that from men. You don't normally see that from females.
And that could have been something, again, maybe evolutionarily that developed because that was necessary.
Right.
Because the women weren't always the ones like hunting and like fending off bears and stuff, right? Like, I mean, that's just the reality of kind of, and that's again another reason why, women are generally more like compassionate and empathetic and caring. Why? Because they have to raise children and that's what they, you have to do, right? Like, so there's just all these different reasons. And like, if men weren't as disagreeable and confrontational, then they wouldn't have been able to like protect everybody in the tribe. And that kind of stuff just like trickles down over time and culture. And then now into training, and we see it. But again, of course, there's plenty of men, I'm sure, who can't tap into their nervous system and are weak as shit and probably always will be. And then there's also women
100%.
who are amazing strength athletes who are going to be in the UFC and, all that kind of stuff, which is that they do the UFC. I'm like not into that whole Do they do UFC?
Yeah.
Women? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know if it was like called something else. I'm like, yeah, they do a WWE, like, like any kind of just really intensive sport like that, there's just always going to be outliers.
When you're trying to select a diet, you're going to want, like, if you're somebody that has struggled or if somebody doesn't want to deal with meal prep and you don't want to mess around with all these things, to me, again, a ketogenic diet allows for a little bit more flexibility.
100%.
You don't go to the grocery store, being able to roll through Starbucks. You get a coffee, you get some heavy cream. You can stop and get their protein box, eat some of the cheese, eat some of the eggs out of it. Hard-boiled eggs, by the way, are a great snack for anyone on any diet, and they're very easy and convenient. And now they're pre-made.
Ate that on the plane.
Pre-made. Oh yeah, it makes everyone gets super excited. Even using a company like Wild Planet, which has chicken, salmon, it's got these canned things. It might sound disgusting to you, but they taste great. They work really well.
Even you can get a high quality protein powder that tastes amazing.
Yeah, they taste great.
There's you literally put it in a shaker. I mean, you can make it a bunch of other better ways, but there's literally no excuse to not get. And I would say that as far as if people are trying to start and like, what should I do?
Look at the airport. The airport's full. Like the airport is full of junk, but the airport's actually full of good food too.
A
There's
lot
tons
better.
of good food.
So like I see like Fairlife milk now, like the higher
a
protein
cheese
milk,
stick, yogurt. I mean, there's options.
jerky. I mean, there's so many options. If people are starting
Epic
out,
bars, those are great.
I haven't actually had those yet.
Those are amazing.
They're good? Okay.
Yeah, they're really good.
I would say that protein is definitely the most important thing to focus on, that people really undereat if they're not,
That's a good
aware of
point.
what they're doing. And I would say that, again, you don't need to like whip out your food scale every time you eat something, but eat protein at every meal 3 to 4 times a day at least. I think that that's like a good recommendation. How much? Obviously, it's going to depend on your size, but just starting with that, hey, have some protein at every single meal. You're going to be a lot more satiated. And then obviously it's going to have a lot more metabolic effects as well than, carbs and fats. And even if you don't have time, you have time for a scoop of protein and water,
Right.
and you can have that. And then a few hours later, have a meal.
Well, and how about the old measuring of the protein should just be like the size of your hand or the size of your palm?
Yeah. I mean, just normal
Pretty
shit.
simple.
It's really, really simple, and just trying to have that at every meal. I find that people really undereat that. They're like, oh, I had protein. I had an egg. That's another grandma thing, right? That's my grandma.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so full. I had an egg. And I'm like, Grandma, you housed a banana and a bowl of cereal and orange juice.
Yeah.
You couldn't have had 2 eggs. Like, So,
And, salad doesn't really count that much for your vegetables because we know that you only like that because it's loaded with dressing.
yeah. So if you get salad, which is great if you have it with mostly vegetables and a little bit of dressing,
Right.
but you really have to monitor that. I mean, those are the easy things. So when people try to eat out, I try to say, let's just get like steamed veggies instead. Like usually that's easier than trying to get a salad, because you gotta like worry about
You'd
what's
actually
in
be
it.
surprised if you throw some vinegar, balsamic vinegar, not balsamic vinaigrette, but balsamic vinegar, sometimes even lemon, sometimes even salsa. I mean, you throw some of these things on a salad, it actually makes it taste pretty good. And you're the funny thing is you're not even gonna understand how a lot of these things taste because you've been drowning them in Thousand Island dressing and ranch dressing for so many years.
So that doesn't even sound good to me.
No,
That sounds awful.
Sounds gross.
I mean, give me some peanut butter cups, but like the Thousand Island dressing, you can have that.
Yeah.
That's been my problem with like trying to eat vegetables, because what he was talking about, people saying I hate vegetables. I am those people.
That's you.
But like just recently, I just started eating a bell pepper for breakfast, like just plain, not just a bell pepper.
I was
but,
like, it's kind of interesting.
no, with with like eggs and and whatnot, but just a plain bell pepper is really good.
Yeah.
And like I never would have thought of it, but
Literally
just
put some salt and pepper on that bitch, and
yeah,
you're
but
good.
instead I'm
Yeah.
trying to like dice it up and fry it with other things to kind of hide the taste. But it's like shit. Like I didn't even know what a bell pepper tasted like by itself, and it's really good.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot more people
You'd be
like me.
shocked too
Yeah.
if you tried that with like arugula or if you tried that with spinach and you just ate it by itself. It actually tastes good. Kale in a protein shake. It tastes.
Yeah, you can't
I don't know.
taste.
I don't know why, because kale's not good by itself, but it tastes pretty good in a protein shake.
Yeah, you really can't taste it. I mean, just don't look if you like don't want to see that their shake's green now.
Yeah.
That could kind of freak people out.
It adds
but,
like an appley taste to it almost. Yeah.
Apparently, you can put cauliflower in shakes too. Cauliflower is the most versatile vegetable. If you guys haven't gotten that out of this podcast.
Yeah. Make rice out of it and everything. Why do you guys think people get so offended when you do decline their food? Like I get it all the time from like family. It's like, no, I cannot eat that right now. It's like, were you too good for it, or like?
I think that obviously can be a cultural thing, and it stems from people putting work into it. It would be like if somebody, I guess, gave you a gift, and you were like, "Oh, I don't want that right now." They'd be like, "Oh, I guess you hate it. You think this is ugly, right?" It would be kind of the same thing, because food to a lot of people is like art and like their work, and they're pouring in their heart into that. Obviously, some cultures are more into that than others. I would say, like obviously like Italian, like that's like it's very offensive if you don't want to like eat their food.
Yeah.
But you just have to. So I deal with this question a lot with clients, like, hey, my family or my friends or colleagues, whatever, like the pressure is on to like eat, and like how do I not give in?
Yeah.
And what I generally find is that if you explain to people what you're doing and why you're doing it, they're more likely to understand. When you just say like, no, I can't have that, or like, no, I can't do this, or no, I can't, they just think that you're like bailing on them, or they just think that you're trying to be rude. But if you say like, hey, have a real conversation, like, listen, this is what I'm trying to do. You know, whether it's I'm trying to lose 10 pounds for real, I'm trying to step on this stage, I'm trying to win this powerlifting meet, whatever it is. You explain to them like, this is part of me doing this and getting better. Then they're usually okay. People don't want to, you know, if they don't understand what you're doing, they're not going to get behind it.
Yeah.
So I find that it's really, really helpful to have that conversation. Like, this is what I'm doing, and this is this is just one of the ways I have to do it. And then afterwards, generally speaking, they're pretty supportive. They'll be like, oh, do you have to eat this today? Or like, you know, you know, we can go here because like you can eat this, right? Or, you know, people become supportive, but you just have to explain it to them because.
You always tell people that you have explosive diarrhea.
Everyone kind of already knows that about me by now. But
you're like, hey, last time.
Yeah, I don't want to have to clean up your bathroom again. But no, that's awesome because that was my next question. Was like, yeah, how do we let people down softly? But because like I genuinely feel like I'm nervous when I have my food with me when I take it to a family function because I'm like, fuck, what are these people? You know, what's someone gonna say next? You know, but
and I'll be honest. It's just kind of like when people say, oh, I'm scared to go to the gym because people are watching me. Nobody fucking cares. Being straight up. Most people aren't watching you at the gym, right? Like there might be like one guy who's like trying to film me if you're like doing something stupid, right? For the most part, people are just focusing on their own goals, doing their own thing. Your family, you may be internalizing, or your friends or whoever, you may be internalizing that they think that it's weird or that they think that it's like, oh, why is he doing this? But they're really not. And again, if you just have the conversation and explain to them, hey, this is why I'm doing this. I would love your support to get behind this. If you don't like it, then that's fine. I'm still going to keep working towards this. But you just have to, you know, a lot of times we just create these things in our heads far worse than they really are. I mean, we're all guilty of that for everything.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with the food thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, you know, you can also eat before you get there. And somebody say, hey, like, you know, we're going to, even when you sit down and eat, you can just say, hey, I'm just, you know, I'm not hungry. But like she's saying, if you explain your goal and you explain what you're doing, and you said, look, I just want to be in better shape. I work out all the time. I work out really hard. And I just want to like see the results from that. I want to see what I can do in the next, you know, few weeks. Probably won't do this all the time. You know, you kind of sell it like that. Say, probably won't do this all the time. Like at Christmas, you're going to see me like going nuts on whatever food we have. But I'm just trying something a little different. I want to see what I can do with myself. And most people aren't going to be like, pfft. A couple people might, you know, poo it because they're scared because they don't want to like kind of make the jump themselves.
Yeah.
But some people might just ask you more questions. They might be like, hey, like that's actually kind of cool. Like I should be doing that.
Yeah. How did you get, and then like a few months they see you're like, oh, how did you get like, you know, whatever. And then, you know, for perfect example. So a few weeks ago before a show I did, I was in Vegas it was a client show. And, you know, we went out afterwards, like, you know, everybody, you know, go out for like the post-show meal and whatever. And I'm excited to be there for my clients. And I had started peaking that weekend. People were like, how are you here? I'm like, how would I not be here? First of all, one of my clients turned pro. I was like, I would have shot myself in the face if I wasn't here to like be a part of that. You know what I mean? And I'm a coach first and foremost. You know what I mean? I'm here to support my clients. And I can be somewhere and still be like doing things, right? And then we go out, and of course it was like this like fancy burger place with like crazy shakes, and obviously like I wanted that, but I ordered water and got some pickles. And I, you know, not like I wanted that.
Yeah.
But you're a part of it and you enjoy it, and everybody, you know, they're like, oh, I know you wish you could eat this, but like we totally get like, and obviously I was with other competitors, so they totally understand. But it's, you know, you just have to, you can be a part of things and be doing it differently.
Yeah, you're sacrificing for something in the future, which is exciting.
Yeah, and any
You
goal.
have a commitment.
Why is that up there?
Hey,
squirrel?
That's our show.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I just wanted to bring it up so you guys can talk about it.
I still think this is the funniest thing that we're doing the same show.
I don't think it's that funny.
It's pretty ironic.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think, I mean, mine was weird just because Hani kind of picked it for me. Just a local show, and it's kind of a smaller show, and that's kind of why he wanted me to do it.
Oh, it is?
And so, boom, there I am. I'm in it. And then
you're gonna be on the poster next year? Is that the
plan? I hope not. I hope
like
not.
For the love of God.
But I'm bigger than that guy, I think. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
Got him by a few lbs at least, right?
Yeah.
Just a few.
Especially never mind. Well, because you saw him take his shorts off in the middle.
I mean, that was things got pretty intense in the workout. Just pose in session.
Yeah. Any advice for after the show for Mark, especially like literally like right after the show?
Right
Lot of
after
baby
the show.
wipes.
Yeah, what do we got?
First, shower, because you'll want to get the nasty ass tan off of you.
Oh yeah.
Put on some deodorant because you won't have worn that for like a whole day, so that's pretty gross. Also,
Really?
yeah, you can't wear deodorant. I don't know if they told you that. Like, I'm not kidding. Don't
Oh,
put it
shit.
on. Your armpits will turn green,
Oh.
and it like bleeds out. Like you'll have green arm. It's very obvious. So once you shower on Friday,
I didn't get around to even shaving my armpits, but they're not very hairy.
no, you don't. You don't have to shave them.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can if you want, but actually, I don't know if that's a thing. Whatever, it's fine. Yeah, once you shower Friday, and then if you're gonna shave certain areas, shave, and then you go into the tan. You have no deodorant on, and you can't wear any. And then the day of the show, they're also tanning you, and then they're gonna glaze you, and you're gonna be sweating. It's gonna be really kind of gross. It's very unglamorous.
Everybody smells really good on stage, I bet.
Oh yeah, under the lights. Yeah, it's awesome. So first things first, shower, deodorant, and
For
then
the actual
go
show, do I
enjoy
need like
some
lip
food.
balm or something? Everybody said your face was gonna crack apart.
I would say that that's probably just some people dehydrate super heavy, so that could be part
Oh.
of it. And then just in general, like standing under like hot lights and like smiling and like doing, like you're not used to that. You're gonna feel like your whole face is shaking. I mean, maybe not. Maybe you're not gonna smile. If you're gonna blue steel it, I don't know. But if you're generally, there's gonna be a lot of, I say the word anxiety, but it's an exciting anxiety. You're just gonna
Right.
feel like this rush before you go on, so you're gonna feel like your whole body's like just hyped up, and nobody's really gonna notice. But like sometimes you're like, oh my god, my whole face was like going crazy, right? And everybody's like, no, you were fine. But I would say the lip cracking is probably people who've really dehydrated, which I would not recommend if you're doing a competition.
Especially if it's your first show. Take it easy.
Yeah, I mean,
Have some fun.
if you're not ready, dehydrating's
ready.
not gonna help.
Yeah.
So,
that's true.
all the diuretics in the world are not gonna help you if you're fat. Just being honest. And then after the show, after the show, you have to watch me do finals because we're after you. So that's after the shower, then you can watch finals. And then I don't know, go out to eat and like do the whole like post show thing with like your family, and
I'll be out of there. I'll be out of there.
Yeah.
Shoom, I'll be getting the hell out of there as soon as I can.
Oh yeah. No, like
Yeah.
don't hang around, but go have like enjoy a meal, whatever I don't know. Have you been craving anything?
No, there hasn't been anything to. I mean, it's weird because you deprive so much of stuff. Like, all I really care about is like just a cheeseburger. But I don't even really care that much about that.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna eat. Yeah, I'm gonna.
There's gonna be like a group of people, and it's just kind of like fun, like having a glass of wine or like whatever you want, and just kind of like celebrate. But definitely shower and deodorant first would be like the number one tip.
So that people want to hang out with me.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're gonna be going to eat by yourself.
Anyway, yeah, it'd be fun. It's gonna be fun to do this show with you. It'd be cool.
I know. I can't wait, and we have to find a good spot for afterwards.
How can people get a hold of you? How can people get help from you? And you have your own podcast.
Yeah.
Where you're giving out information all the time.
Yeah. So I co-host 2 podcasts. One is Redefine Healthy Radio. That's with Paul Ravella. And then the other one is The Unglamorous Life, and that's with Celeste Bonn. So they're both pretty fun, and we really, sometimes it's just us, and then sometimes it's us and guests. We just have a really good time with it. So that would be the 2 podcasts. My website is just my name, laurinconlin.com. All my social media is at Laurin Conlin. It's Laurin with an I, so if you spell it right, you will find everything.
Very cool. Any other questions over there, buddy?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, it was Laurin Conlin. We had a good time and excited to hit up this bodybuilding show. Thank you guys for watching. Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. See you later.